I was never the type to romanticize crime. Stealing art to me was always math, risk, time, final value. No glamour, no movies, just work. So when they asked me to break into the New York Public Library, I thought it was odd. A library wasn't my kind of target. I worked with galleries and private collections, places where the money was on the walls, not in books. The middleman, Mercer, called me on a rainy afternoon. Said there was a special item stored down there in the part no one visits. It's not in the system, he said. Officially, it doesn't exist. I was at a cafe in Midtown, watching tourists walk by on the sidewalk. Mercer always talked like that, like the world was full of secret doors only he knew about. If it doesn't exist, who's paying for it? I asked. Whoever knows it does, he replied. He handed me an envelope with internal maps, patrol schedules, and a short video showing an employee opening an unmarked door in the basement. Go in through the loading area in the back, he explained. The cleaning crew leaves at 2. The guard does his round at 2:15 and stays away from the basement for about 20 minutes. That's your window. What am I grabbing? He took a deep breath. A crystal orb. It's cataloged as an unregistered archaeological object. Before I could close the envelope, he added, "Don't stay in the halls too long, and don't look straight into the basement cameras. Just follow the plan." It was a strange warning. Nothing about lasers or invisible sensors, it was about behavior. But upfront payment makes you go along with certain things. At 2 in the morning, I was behind the library, light rain falling, my dark coat sticking to my body. The loading gate went up with a metallic groan. The inner door opened with the device Mercer gave me. I stepped in. The smell was the first surprise. It wasn't just old paper. It was a mix of ancient dust, strong cleaner, cold air, and something metallic, kind of like the smell in the air after lightning. The plan was simple. Loading area, service stairs, basement level 2, special collections room, shelf C, right box, item, 5 minutes, tops. I walked down the hallway while the last cleaning staff talked somewhere in the distance. My footsteps echoed too loud for an enclosed space. I quickly found the service stairs. As I headed down to the first basement, the air suddenly turned colder. I stopped on the landing, took a deep breath. No weird smell, just cold. Way too fast. I ignored it and kept going. Basement 1 looked well maintained. Signs, clean floors, smooth walls. I went left, then right, following the door count I'd memorized. So far, so normal. Until I saw the clocks. The first clock said 2:10. The second at the end of the hallway said 1:45. The watch on my wrist, 2:03. I figured it was bad maintenance. Public building. No one cares about clocks. But something about that difference put me on alert, even if I didn't know why. I headed down to basement level 2. The door had a window. Inside looked the same, just emptier. Mercer's keycard worked again. The silence in basement 2 was different, heavy. My steps sounded muffled, like there was something in the air absorbing the sound. The metal sign read, "Special Collections, Restricted Access." The lock was mechanical. Good news. I got it open easily. When the door gave way, I felt cold air come out of the room, like it had been shut for a long time. I turned on my small flashlight. The room was smaller than I'd expected. Metal shelves, labeled boxes, covered display cases. I looked for shelf C, climbed the step stool, found the box. Archaeological object, no location. I opened it. The orb was there, resting in foam, about the size of a baseball. Its surface was dark, smooth, strange. It absorbed the flashlight beam instead of reflecting it. I picked it up with both hands. It was heavy, way too heavy. The kind of weight you feel in your wrist. And for a moment, the air shifted. Not warm, not cold, just different, like I was breathing a denser kind of wind. I heard a sound in the hallway, something like a light tap on the wall. I turned off the flashlight, stood still, silent, holding the orb tight against my chest. No second sound. I turned the flashlight back on, and I noticed the box lid, which I had left open, was now closed. I tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe I'd bumped it with my arm. Maybe the cold air had pushed it. Maybe I was just too tired. I held on to that idea. I put the orb in my backpack, wrapped in cloth, closed everything, and climbed down from the step stool. When I went to leave, I looked at the clock hanging above the door. 2:10. But I had entered about 5 minutes earlier. On my wrist, 2:04, out of sync. Again, I was about to ignore it when I felt something else. A change in the hallway. I didn't see anything, but I had the impression the light had gone still, like the air was waiting. I looked up at the ceiling. For a split second, I saw something like a transparent veil sliding across the panels. When I blinked, it was gone. I tightened the straps of my backpack. I could have left. I could have gone up the stairs, exited through the back, and delivered the orb. Payment guaranteed. Clean job. But it became clear that something had changed. The entire library seemed to have noticed my presence, not before, but in that moment. As if touching the orb had turned on a light I didn't know existed. And now something, somewhere in that huge building, was looking back. I left the special collections room with the feeling that the air behind me was getting heavier. The door closed without a sound, and the basement level 2 hallway looked way too normal. Clean, empty, well lit. I wanted to believe everything was the same as when I came in, but the backpack weighing on my shoulders said otherwise. The orb felt like it was pulling my body backward, like it wanted to stay down there. I looked at the watch on my wrist. 2:08. I looked at the wall clock. 2:10. Bad maintenance, I murmured, trying to sound calm. I started walking. I knew it was 3 doors to the corner and 10 steps to the stairs. I had memorized it all. Past the first door, then the second, then the third. But the corner felt farther away than before. I stopped, took a few steps back, touched the doors with my hand, counting again. 1, 2, 3, and the hallway kept going like it had been stretched. I tried to convince myself I had remembered it wrong, that the map was confusing, that I was just tired, but the hallway looked new, like it had grown while I was inside the room. Still, I kept going. The service stairs finally showed up and I went up to basement level 1. I took a deep breath when I got there. It felt like a more normal space. Snack machine, water fountain, direction signs. But something was off. The snack machine was supposed to be next to a column on the map. Now there were 2. Identical. Same stain, same crack, same height. Like a copy and paste gone wrong. Blink. Look again. Only 1 column. I tried to ignore it and headed for the ground floor. On the way, I passed the old portraits. Serious women and men, donors from past decades. I stopped in front of the portrait of a woman wearing a pearl necklace. Something in her expression was off. When I stood closer, it seemed like she was looking slightly at me, not at the camera. If I shifted my position, she went back to looking straight ahead. But when I returned to the exact same spot as before, her eyes shifted again. That got to me. I picked up my pace. I reached the stairs leading to the ground floor. The empty library felt strange. No people, no pages flipping, no students whispering. My footsteps echoed too loudly. The early morning lighting made everything look half golden and half shadowed at the same time. I went through a side door and entered the bust room. Writers, politicians, historical figures. I had seen rooms like that before. But this time, something froze me. A bust at the far end, a bald man with a thick mustache, turned a few degrees to the left as if watching the door. I kept walking, trying to ignore it. In the middle of the room, I stopped. Something strong made me turn around. The bust was facing forward now. I swallowed hard, touched my backpack. The orb felt even heavier, almost glued to my spine. I left the room quickly and reached Astor Hall, the main hall. The ceiling with its painted sky and clouds looked darker, almost purple. For a moment I was sure the clouds had shifted, stretching to one side, like the sky was sliding. Blink. Look again. Everything normal. I went to the counter with a security camera panel. I wasn't supposed to touch it, but I needed to see if what I was feeling made any sense. I pressed the button that cycled through the cameras. Hallways. Stairs. The reading room. The basement. When the camera switched to the bust room, my stomach dropped. The room was empty, but in the corner of the screen I saw myself walking into the room. Again, as if retracing the path, except I was in the hall, standing right in front of the panel. I leaned closer to the monitor, not understanding. The me on the screen stopped in the middle of the room, lifted his head toward the camera and smiled. I wasn't smiling, but that version smiled like it knew I was watching. I switched cameras fast. Images from other floors flashed across the screen. I stepped back, breathing hard. The backpack warmed up. I opened the zipper just a little. The orb was glowing with geometric patterns, thin lines forming circles, impossible maps, drawings that moved slowly, like they were searching for some kind of correct shape. I closed the backpack immediately. The hall looked bigger now. The columns seemed taller, the doors farther away. It was like the space had been pulled, stretched, expanded, without me seeing it happen. That's when I realized I didn't have to face any of this, I could just leave. I decided to head to the main exit just to see the street again and remind myself the real world still existed. I climbed the steps to the glass doors, grabbed the metal bar, pushed. Nothing. Tried again. Nothing. Pulled. Nothing. Fiddled with the lock. Nothing. Outside, Manhattan carried on as always. Yellow cabs, someone with an umbrella, cars passing. Normal. I was the one who was trapped. I pressed my face to the glass to look more closely. That's when my eyes were drawn to the lions. Patience and fortitude. They're always in the same position, looking straight ahead. But now something was different. Small, subtle, hard to explain. Their muzzles seemed turned slightly toward me, like they were watching, like they were waiting for me to notice. And in that moment, I understood. With a clarity that hurt. I wasn't just trying to get out. The library was deciding whether it would let me leave. I stood in front of the glass door for a few seconds, trying to convince myself that everything outside, cars, buses, people walking in the rain, still made sense. I just needed to take a deep breath, think straight, and find a normal explanation. There's always one. Gas leak, strong cleaning chemicals, sleep deprivation, anything. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Not even a single bar. I opened the messaging app, but it froze. At least the camera still worked. I pointed it at the lions outside. On the screen, they were facing forward like usual. In real life, they were tilted just a few degrees toward me. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, the feeling got worse. I turned the camera toward the hall. On the screen, everything looked smaller, like a tight space. In my vision, the hall was larger, like the walls were farther apart than before. It was like the library was offering two versions of itself, one seen through my eyes, the other through the lens. I tried to give a nervous smile. Must be gas, must be the lighting, must be something normal, I murmured. But the orb heated up on my back, pushing that thought out of my head. It was a heat that felt like it came from the center of something alive, pulsing slowly. I went over to the staff counter and took off my backpack. I opened the zipper carefully. The orb was there, glowing with those thin lines sliding across its surface. But now there was also a rhythmic hum, like a sequence of musical notes not meant for human ears. I tried to record it, pointed my phone, captured a few seconds. When I played the video back, the orb wasn't there. The space where it should have been was just a dark blur, like it had been erased. I scrubbed through the video frame by frame. Nothing. Like the camera refused to acknowledge it. Before I could think it through, I heard a sound. It wasn't exactly a voice, it was a mix of long and short tones, like someone trying to speak using a broken instrument. The sound seemed to come from the ceiling, the walls, and also from inside my own head. I stayed still. The sound repeated a sequence. Pause. Another sequence. Short, long, pause. It felt like it was trying to form a sentence. "I don't understand you," I whispered. The sound stopped immediately. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Before I could react, I saw movement to my right. A small writer's bust, a stone piece that shouldn't move, was trembling. Slightly, almost imperceptibly. But I was standing still, so any vibration felt like a scream. The base of the bust creaked, like something inside the stone was pushing to get out. I slowly backed away until my back hit a cabinet. The bust stopped instantly, like a wild animal that realized it had been seen. I wasn't staying there. I grabbed the backpack and stepped into a side reading room. Long tables, packed bookshelves, low lighting, a place that on any other day would have felt cozy. I tried to take a deep breath, looked up. The ceiling had plain white panels. Blink. In the next instant, the panels were covered in eyes. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Human eyes, animal eyes, eyes that didn't belong to anything I knew, all staring at me. My mind froze. I knew this couldn't be real. Knew no room in the world worked like that. But there it was, and I could feel the weight of all that attention. Blink. The eyes were gone. The ceiling was normal again. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone and filmed the ceiling for a few seconds. The video showed only white panels. No eyes, no shadows. The phone showed a stable world. My eyes saw a completely different one. Suddenly, the camera's focus shifted on its own. The lens pointed toward the last bookshelf in the room. On the screen, there was a figure standing there. A tall body, far too thin to be human. Like someone had built a skeleton using only straight lines. Arms too long, legs too long. The joints bent in strange ways, as if they followed a math of their own. I turned my head slowly. In real life, there was nothing there. I looked at the phone. The figure was still on the screen, unmoving, as if waiting for me to notice. The head looked slightly tilted, like it was trying to listen. Without meaning to, I zoomed in. There was no face, just a tangle of crossed lines like scratches on fogged glass. The figure began to turn toward the camera. Slowly, very slowly, like it was learning how to move. I dropped the phone. It hit the table hard. The screen landed face down. I waited for some sound. Footsteps, breathing, anything coming from the back of the room. Nothing came. The silence felt alert. I picked the phone up from the floor. The screen had cracked in one corner. The video I'd recorded no longer existed. It wasn't in the gallery, not in the files. It was like the recording had been erased before I even finished it. A strong feeling, almost like a truth being pushed against my chest, finally settled. It wasn't the library. It was the orb. The NYPL had always been just a building too big, full of rooms, full of echoes. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had happened until the moment I touched that sphere. Clocks out of sync, hallways changing size, sculptures trying to move, figures that showed up only in recordings, eyes on the ceiling, impossible voices. Everything started with the orb. Everything was reacting to the orb, and the orb was reacting to me. I didn't know what it wanted. I didn't know if it understood what I was. I only knew that something had seen me that night. And now that it had seen me, it seemed determined not to let me go. Accepting that everything started the moment I touched the orb changed the way I saw what was happening. The fear was still strong, but it stopped feeling like chaos. It became more technical, like I was dealing with a routing problem, not a panic attack. If that thing wanted to drive me insane, I needed to understand what it was doing, and why. I had always watched for patterns. That's how I survived, studying guard schedules, security behavior, escape routes. So I started doing the same there, even with my heart beating like it was trying to break my ribs. The first thing I tested was distance. I put the backpack on again and walked away from the reading room. The farther I got, the more the orb's hum faded. In the side hallway, it almost disappeared. When I got near the main hall, the sound grew, like the object was getting excited. Conclusion: the larger the space, the more the orb woke up. Second test: light. I turned off my flashlight. The darker the room, the brighter the lines on the orb's surface became. Near interior windows where some street light still came through, the glow weakened. Another pattern. The orb responded to the environment like it was trying to map the building. The third test happened without me planning it. I walked past an advertisement board with photos of smiling students. For the first time, it startled me in a stupid way. Maybe because of the contrast with the horror I'd seen minutes earlier. At that same moment, the orb heated up so fast I felt the warmth through the backpack. That's when I realized it reacted to my fear. It wasn't just in large spaces or in the dark. It was when I felt real fear that the orb reacted the strongest. I walked down the hallway trying to calm myself. Took a deep breath like one of those meditation tutorials I always ignored. I thought about normal things. Cheap coffee, a basketball game, city traffic noise. Little by little, the heat faded. The hum softened like the orb was waiting. The pattern was clear. Fear equals energy. Calm equals pause. Whatever was connected to the orb was using my emotions as fuel. I went back to the hall, but now on the second level, a balcony that overlooked the entire space. From up there, I saw the columns, the doors, the empty tables, and the faint streetlight hitting the lions outside. I tightened the backpack strap. "What do you want?" I murmured, not even knowing why I was talking to a metal sphere. The answer came fast. The hum shifted into an organized sequence of sounds. Long notes, short notes, pauses. It wasn't random, it was a pattern, a language. And as I listened, something moved below. One of the busts near the entrance vibrated, then another, and another. The shadows beside them began to stretch, like something was pulling the outlines out of the floor. They weren't people, they weren't ghosts. They were shapes far too thin, made of straight shadows like stick figure mannequins drawn with a ruler trying to become three-dimensional. The sub-creatures didn't run or attack. They just stood still, as if they were listening to the same sound I was. That's when it hit me hard. The creature didn't want to hurt me. It wanted to understand me. And it was using everything around us, sculptures, shadows, walls, to test possible forms, failed tests, unfinished versions, rehearsals. And I was the model. When I felt fear, the orb glowed stronger. When the orb glowed, the distorted shapes became more solid. The more solid they became, the closer they got to something human, a perfect cycle, an organic algorithm. I tried to prove myself wrong, so I closed my eyes and forced my mind to picture the hall as normal. Students, bright light, librarians pushing book carts. I breathed slowly. When I opened my eyes, the figures had stopped stretching. They were still there, but as if someone had hit pause. The orb cooled down too. I had control, minimal, fragile, but control. I decided to test one more thing. I took the backpack off my shoulder, placed it on the balcony floor, and unzipped it just a little. The glowing lines were no longer chaotic. Now they looked like maps. Lines connecting points, paths crossing, circles linked together. Then the lines gathered in the center and formed the outline of a building. I recognized it immediately. The rectangle, the staircases, the two front openings. It was the New York Public Library. The orb had learned the shape of the place, and on the map, right on the second level, there was a blinking dot, a pulse of light. Me. It knew exactly where I was. I shut the backpack so fast I almost caught my hand in the zipper. A sound echoed through the hall below, a faint dragging, like stones scraping against stone. I went to the railing and looked down. That's when I saw it. The main creature. It was bigger than the shadows. It had solid parts, pieces of sculptures borrowed from the library. One arm looked like it was made from the marble of a broken statue. One leg had the texture of an old column. The torso was a pile of mismatched busts, jammed together and held by a black void. The head was a mosaic of incomplete faces, a statue's nose, part of a jaw from another, sculpted eyes that didn't match, all layered together like no one had ever explained to the creature what a face was supposed to look like. And still I could feel it looking at me. It took its first step. The floor seemed to tremble, and the smaller shadows around it shifted like they'd received a command. And there, in that impossible moment, I realized something that scared me as much as it fascinated me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't hunting. It was curious. Like someone who had finally managed to build a body just to be able to stand up and look at the world for the first time. I stood on the balcony watching that assembled thing down below, trying to keep itself upright. It looked like a person made out of museum pieces, a statue's arm, part of a column, a face built from several mismatched busts. and even so, I could feel it. It knew I was up there. The orb started vibrating again inside the backpack at my feet. The hum rose so sharply I felt it in my teeth. I get it, I murmured. Sorry for touching you. As if answering me, the hall floor shook. It wasn't a strong tremor, not like a California earthquake. It was a short shift, like the entire structure had adjusted its position. The tables slid a few centimeters. The chairs moved on their own. The columns, for a moment, looked closer to each other, then farther apart, like the library was running tests on its own shape. I blinked, and the stairs changed. Before, there had been 2 main flights leading down to the hall. Now I saw at least 4 different access points where nothing should exist. One staircase came out of a side wall, another emerged from behind a column. All of them led to the same place, but by different paths. Labyrinth. That was the word my brain threw in my face. Down below, the small shadows that had come out of the busts started walking. They didn't move like people. Their steps were too stiff, like badly rendered stop-motion dolls. They circled the larger creature, like a group of confused helpers. The main thing lifted its head toward the balcony where I stood. The patchwork of overlapping faces had no expression, but I felt a kind of focus coming from it. Like someone on another planet had turned a giant lens and adjusted the zoom upward. I stepped back. The orb reacted instantly. The hum turned into a deep tone, almost like the sound of a data center server room when you walk into a hall full of them. Dense, constant. Then came the lions. From my angle, I could see part of the facade through the glass doors. Patience and fortitude were still lying on their pedestals, but something about them looked wrong. Their heads had lifted a few centimeters. Their front paws had shifted position. When they opened their mouths, the sound that came out wasn't animal. It wasn't a roar. It was like an audio glitch, like when a video freezes and the sound gets stuck on a fragment. A rah, 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 full of digital distortion, echoing through the walls like a blown speaker. The windows shook. The chandeliers trembled. The hall floor responded. Down below, the marble began to light up with lines. It was like someone was drawing with light across the floor, geometric shapes unfolding right under my eyes. First squares, then more complex figures with repetitions, patterns splitting into smaller shapes and those into even smaller ones. Fractals. I'm not a mathematician, but I'd seen something like it in a documentary. The difference was, in the documentary, it was on a screen. Here, it was under a creature made of building parts. Each step the thing took made the floor pattern shift, like the whole surface was a massive circuit board. That's when I stopped trying to hide and started to understand. I hadn't stolen a work of art. I had activated a device. The orb inside my backpack wasn't just some relic, it was a beacon, a kind of GPS for something else, from somewhere else. When I touched it, I sent a signal. There's someone here. There's material here. You can come. And that thing came. I didn't know if it came from another dimension, another planet, or from beneath the ground. What was clear was that it didn't know what a body was. It was improvising. You're trying to copy, I said, barely able to breathe. Copy us, copy the building, copy everything at once. The sound in the hall shifted again. That language of noises I'd heard before got faster, louder. The smaller shadows scattered into the hallways. I saw one pass through a side door, another go up part of a staircase, another slip into a reading room. The library wasn't just a backdrop anymore. It was raw material. Down below, the main creature took a step toward the base of the nearest column. With the impact, the fractals on the floor adjusted, stretching their lines toward the staircase I was on. Part of me wanted to run the other way. Another part wanted to see how far this would go. Curiosity won for a second. It was the worst choice I could have made. I walked down a few steps, trying to reach a lower point on the balcony. Each time I moved, the light inside the backpack reacted, as if marking my position on an invisible map. When I stopped, the thing stopped too. It stood directly below me, in the hall. Upright, though twisted, it almost reached the height of the balcony. The stone parts that made up its body looked more aligned now, less loosely held together. The overlapping faces shifted in a slow sequence, like they were trying to find an angle. One eye from an old statue lined up with a hollow from another head. A crooked mouth fit into place for a few seconds. It was the closest thing to an expression I'd seen so far. It raised one of its arms. The movement wasn't fast, but it wasn't heavy either. It was careful. The arm stretched to its limit, stone fingers opening and closing, like they were testing the air. It couldn't reach the balcony. Still, some dark part between the chunks of stone extended past them like a shadow stretching under the right light. That formless part was the one that touched me. It wasn't a physical touch, like a push. It was like someone had placed a hand on top of my mind and tilted it slightly to the side. I didn't see the hall. I didn't see the columns. I didn't see the library anymore. For a second that lasted too long, I saw the other side. I saw a darkness that wasn't night. It was total absence of anything physical, and within it I saw drawings of light crossing paths, trails, routes, signals leading from one point to another. I saw something that looked like a planet, but it wasn't the color of stone or water or gas. It was made of lines like a globe of wires pulsing. I saw other orbs like the one I had stolen floating in that darkness, each with different patterns on its surface, like antennas dropped into a sea of nothing. And I saw the thing that was in contact with me now before it arrived here. Not in a body, in pure intention. It was a focus, a point of awareness moving along the lines, analyzing everything, trying to understand, like it had spent its entire existence just observing signals from afar. And then, one day, one of those signals responded to the touch. Some idiot in New York touched an old device in a library basement. I snapped back into my body with a dry jolt. My knees buckled. I had to grab the railing to keep from falling off the balcony. The creature down below was still in the same position, arm extended, head slightly tilted. Only now I knew. It didn't understand the word limit. To it, there was no such thing as, "This is where the wall ends and the street begins," or "This is where one body ends and another begins." Everything was just space where things could be assembled. I was just another collection of shapes, sound, and fear, ready to be copied. The orb on my back was vibrating so hard it felt like it wanted to burst out of the backpack. The lines inside it, I knew without even looking, had to be going wild, reorganizing the map of the library, marking new points of interest. I wasn't just a thief stuck in a building anymore. I was the first face that mind had seen up close. And from the touch it gave me, I understood one simple, clear thing that chilled my spine in a way nothing else had that night. It liked what it saw. I stood still on the balcony for a few seconds, gripping the railing like the floor was swaying beneath me. After that creature touched my mind, my head still felt heavy, like my memory was trying to sort through files that didn't belong to me. The creature stayed in the center of the hall, motionless but alert. The smaller shadows were spread throughout the entire library like confused sentinels. And that's when I understood the most important part of the night. As long as the orb was with me, none of this would stop. The creature would keep learning, copying, assembling the building in any form it found useful. In the morning, staff would arrive, tourists would come in, and it would still be awake, growing, testing. For the first time since I touched the orb, I thought about someone other than myself. If I was the idiot who turned the device on, maybe I had to try to shut it off. I adjusted the backpack on my shoulders even though it was vibrating like there was a machine running inside, and ran for the stairs. My plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Take the orb back to where it had been. I didn't know if that would fix anything, but it was the only move that made any sense. As I went down, the library changed again. Hallways that used to be straight now had soft curves. A door that should have led to a reading room now opened into a narrow corridor with tall shelves. Everything seemed to be rearranging around me, like the building was still deciding what shape it wanted to take. And still, the shadows followed me. Always a few steps behind, always watching but never attacking. It was like they were trying to learn how to follow me. I reached the basement. The air there was colder, but not normal cold. It felt like something was missing from the air, like that part of the library was only halfway built. The special collections door was just as I'd left it, which gave me a false hope that maybe the building was trying to Pretend normal. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The shelves were aligned. The box where the orb had been sat exactly where it should, closed, as if I had never touched it. I climbed the metal step stool carefully, my legs shaking. I opened the backpack. The orb was hotter than ever, vibrating like it had an engine inside. The glowing lines across its surface were so dense I could barely see the metal underneath. It looked alive. I clenched my teeth and placed it back in the box. The effect was immediate. All sound stopped. The vibration vanished. The lights stopped flickering. Even the air went still. For a few seconds, the silence was so heavy it felt like a weight pressing on my chest. I closed the box slowly, afraid to make any noise. Climbed down from the step stool without taking my eyes off the orb, like it might wake up again at any second. When I stepped out of the room, I found the smaller shadows in the hallway, frozen, like they were confused without the orb's signal. I touched my backpack out of reflex. Now it was light. Finally light. "Is it over?" I whispered. The shadows faded, like they'd lost power. Without waiting for anything else, I headed up to the upper floors, trying to keep my steps steady. As I walked, the building started to return to normal. Hallways straightened. The ceiling stopped shifting. The lights stabilized. Even the clocks reset to the right time. When I reached the ground floor, the hall was quiet and normal. The columns, the tables, the stairs, everything looked in place. The larger creature was gone. No trace of it. No sign of the statue pieces that had formed its body. Through the glass doors, the lions looked normal, facing forward like always. For a moment, I believed I had done it. But when I took a deep breath, I noticed something was off. The library breathed with me, a nearly imperceptible sound, like air moving in through the walls and out through the floor. It wasn't a quiet building. It was a living one. Silent, yes, but awake. I tried the main doors, pushed the bar, and this time they opened. The cold air of Fifth Avenue hit my face, and I nearly collapsed. I ran down the steps, past the lions without looking at them, and slipped straight into the motion of the city. Taxis, horns, wind, everything felt more real than I remembered. From that night until now, fragments come back when I least expect them. I slept for 2 days in a cheap room in Queens trying to erase everything, but it didn't go away. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and smell old paper, dust, wood. I feel the heavy air of the library, and for a few seconds I'm sure I'm between shelves, not in my room. Usually it passes, but not always. One night I went to the bathroom, turned on the light, and stopped in front of the mirror. In the reflection, my face looked tired but normal. But behind me, there was something, a very thin, twisted silhouette, like someone trying to imitate my posture but not knowing how to do it yet. When I turned around, the bathroom was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, it was just me. I wanted to believe it was trauma, lack of sleep, paranoia, any human explanation. And I almost managed to believe it. Almost. Sometimes I grab my phone, open the front camera, and just stare at the screen. I wait. Stay still. Just watching. And in a few frames, too fast to catch properly behind my shoulder, I see a shape trying to follow my movements, trying to imitate the way I breathe, trying to copy the way I exist. As if, far from here, in some place made of lines and light, something is still studying my shape and getting better. With every blink,